Good morning, everyone. My name is Dean Anderson. I'm a natural resource specialist at the Tongass National Forest Sitka Ranger District.
Wasai iti gunchish hat yi kao deyayi Kyle Rosendale ye hat duasak. Hello, thank you for being here. My name is Kyle Rosendale. I work for Sitka Tribe of Alaska, and today we are going to take you on a whirlwind tour of contemporary happenings around Kunáa, the Tlingit village site near Redoubt Falls, and hopefully share some things you might not know about Kunáa Shak Ai, the lake at the head of Kunáa.
So for those who may not be familiar with Kunáa Shak Ai, the lake at the head of Kunáa, commonly referred to as a Redoubt Lake, it's a long and very deep lake about 11 miles south of Sitka that has supported a long and rich cultural history. Often today, when we think about Redoubt or Kunáa, we think about sockeye salmon, and that's going to be the focus of our talk today.
But first, a brief detour into lake ecology. So let's consider two lakes for a moment, viewed from the side. Those thick black lines are the bottom of the lake. That blue horizontal line is the surface of the lake. Now, from the perspective of making lots and lots of fat and happy juvenile sockeye salmon, all the action happens near the surface of the lake. That's where we have the most sunlight to fuel the parts of the food web where sockeye salmon are hanging out. Most lakes are holomictic lakes, which means they turn over at least once per year. And turnover is just a giant mixing event in the lake. So water from near the surface of the lake brings oxygen to the bottom of the lake, and water from the bottom of the lake brings nutrients back up to the surface of the lake. This is really important for lake health and function. Now, Kunáa Shak Ai is a little different. It's a meromictic lake, which means it never turns over. It started life as a glacial fjord. It was cut off from the sea. So the bottom 70% of the lake is saltwater. Those are those gray hatched lines there. And this is anoxic, stinky, salty, sulfurous water. It's not a particularly pleasant place to be unless you're a specialized bacterium. The big thing that matters here, though, is that salt water is so dense that there's no exchange between the surface and the bottom. So there's effectively no transfer of nutrients back to the surface. So any nutrients, like from salmon carcasses, for example, that make their way into the bottom of the lake, they're effectively lost to sockeye production. So the big thing to remember here is Redoubt Lake's different than most lakes.
So building from the geography and ecology of the lake, next we'll talk a little bit about some context of management at Kunáa. So salmon monitoring began at the weir in the early 1980s due to concerns of poor returns. For example, in 1982, only 450 sockeye were counted. Also at this time, Alaska Department of Fish and Game's Fisheries Rehabilitation Enhancement and Development Program started adding fertilizer to the lake to help increase productivity. In the late 1990s, the Sitka Advisory Committee held local discussions that led to the Alaska Board of Fisheries adopting the Redoubt Bay and Lake Sockeye Salmon Management Plan in 2003. With record returns in recent years, this management plan has facilitated more sockeye harvest at Kunáa than any other system in Southeast, accounting for over 1/3 of all of the subsistence sockeye harvest reported in the region. We will talk a little bit more about the details of this plan in a few slides, but for now, let us focus on a few recent changes in freshwater conditions at Kunáa, starting with a landslide that occurred in 2013. So this landslide occurred at the north end of the lake. It temporarily dammed the inlet stream, which backed up and formed a new small lake that's about 50 acres in size. The changed topography resulted in this backed up water being permanent, and now Lake Luna sits just above Kunáa. Lake Luna has likely altered the spawning habitat, the rearing habitat, and the nutrient input into the head of Kunáa.
And shortly after that 2013 landslide, we noticed a few unusual events in Kunáa Shak Ai. Between 2014 and 2020, we had these really large, extensive, exceptionally thick cyanobacteria blooms in the lake. That's that picture on the far right there. In 2014, we also had the start of an explosion in the population of Daphnia in the lake. And Daphnia is a juvenile sockeye salmon's absolute favorite food. The University of Washington researcher we work with calls them sockeye burgers. We went from having basically no cyanobacteria and zero Daphnia in the lake prior to the landslide to having lots and lots of cyanobacteria in Daphnia after the landslide. In our biggest sample after the landslide, we had a little more than 40,000 Daphnia per square foot. So picture an area a little smaller than the seat you're sitting on with 40,000 sockeye burgers on it. And you can imagine juvenile sockeye were pretty pleased with this development. While we're talking about changes to the lake, there's another important change to mention. In 2023, after about 40 years, fertilization of Redoubt Lake stopped. This was largely due to the expiration of mitigation funds from the Blue Lake Dam. And we don't actually have a great understanding of how fertilization affected lake or sockeye productivity. So it's exceptionally important to continue water quality monitoring and sockeye monitoring at Redoubt. We don't know if these returns from the last few years are going to continue.
Monitoring efforts at Kunáa have long depended on local and regional partnership support. More recently, formally starting in 2023, the Forest Service and the Sitka Tribe of Alaska have worked collaboratively to operate the salmon weir at Kunáa. Apologies. However, there is not a long-term solution for operations at the weir. As the Forest Service transitions away from leading this work, the Sitka Tribe has provided support to continue operating the weir. However, current resources are only available for the next 2 years, and operations are uncertain beyond 2027. This is really important to note due to how the weir interacts with and supports the existing management plan.
So let's revisit the management plan that Dean mentioned earlier and see how it works in season in particular. The Alaska Department of Fish and Game implements the management plan. Unfortunately, they couldn't be here today, but this is something we talk about with them quite a lot. So the top here kind of shows the process in season. ADF&G receives daily weir counts from Redoubt. They plug those weir counts into a prediction model, which projects escapement into Redoubt Lake. And escapement is just the number of sockeye coming back to the lake. If that projected escapement meets certain thresholds outlined in the management plan, ADF&G can liberalize harvest opportunity. So in practice, that's things like increasing our in-possession limit from 10 to 25 sockeye, increasing our annual harvest limit from 50 to 100 sockeye, allowing STA to use a community harvest permit to distribute sockeye to tribal elders, and opening directed commercial fisheries, which have had an ex-vessel value of a little more than $1 million annually in recent years. So these in-season management actions are super important because they put a lot of sockeye in a lot of people's freezers. And the big thing here is that those weir counts are essential to the management plan. If we don't have a weir, big chunks of the management plan go out the window. Our in-possession limit is capped at 10 sockeye. Our annual limit is capped at 50 sockeye. And community harvest permits and directed commercial fisheries are no longer an option. As Dean mentioned, we don't have long-term funding for the weir, but we are working to secure medium-term funding, and we will keep the Sitka AC and the community abreast of any developments around the weir.
Counting fish at Kunáa has typically been a manual task completed by a team of staff that lives and works at the weir. This is expensive and logistically challenging to sustain long-term, so there's been an increasing need for a more cost-effective approach without sacrificing the quality of the information collected out there.
In 2024, STA received a grant to test and implement a new automated video system out at Redoubt Lake. This was developed by the Salmon Vision Collaborative, which is a group of First Nations, tribes, and industry, nonprofit, and university partners. And so the system uses computer vision models to automatically identify and count salmon swimming through a video shoot. We ran a 3-week pilot study last year. We have a little more than 2,500 videos of salmon swimming into Kunáa Shock IE, and to our knowledge, this is the first use case of its type in the state of Alaska. The results from the pilot study were promising, but the model is not ready for in-season management yet. Some of the salmon vision sites in British Columbia are currently achieving like 90 to 95% accuracy on near real-time counts. We think READOut can get there, but it's going to take a little time. In the meantime, we will use this system in tandem with manual weir counts, and those manual weir counts are especially important early in the season as ADF&G considers making in-season management decisions. Hopefully, if this system can meet performance targets for in-season management, we'll scale back manual weir counts, and hopefully that will make data collection to support the management plan much more financially sustainable.
So to summarize our key points, Kunáa Shakai is a unique mirror-mictic system with unique management that sustains unique community needs. We continue to seek more understanding about the ecology at Kunáa through continued limnological and water quality monitoring and new research opportunities with the University of Washington. The existing management plan relies on in-season data collected at the salmon weir. And lastly, we are exploring ways to ensure that management at Kunáa can sustain the community's needs into the future.
So Gunashish, thank you for your time. I know we threw an awful lot at you, so if you do have questions, we've got our contact information there. And we've also got a QR code which will take you to a link to a dashboard where you can see daily updated weir counts at Redoubt Lake and Clag Bay. That's a really cool project that started in 2023, and I think you can learn more about it at the Nature Mingle this afternoon. But thank you, everyone, for your patience and bearing with us on that whirlwind, and we're happy to try to answer any questions you may have.